What's your reaction to the words of Sergei Lavrov?
I think it's some really amazing justification of the Russian hacking efforts. There's been this very weird echo chamber effect for a long time between WikiLeaks and the Russian government, Russian intelligence services, and parts of the media structure that sort of echo around now President Trump. This definitely seems to be connected to this new narrative that they're pushing, that it was not the Russians responsible for the hackings during the election, but that it was, in fact, the United States hacking its own citizens, which would certainly support the claims that President Trump was making himself if it were true.
If it were true, he's saying from now on it's impossible to find a smoking gun because of these revelations.
This is the Russian line on everything. It's impossible to know the truth in anything in the world. And this absolutely backs up this long-term narrative that they've been pushing, that you can never know who's responsible for anything or what is real and what is not. This is the environment in which the Russians excel strategically in sort of creating chaos and sort of pushing through. It is what they are using very strategically against the United States right now to manipulate our policy and political environment.
Molly, in the report we just heard a short while ago, we heard a much more forceful statement from the White House spokesman than 24 hours previous regarding WikiLeaks and the breaching of national security in the U.S. How do you think the Trump administration is handling this first big data dump that's happening on its watch?
I think it will be interesting to see how the statements evolve. I think for now they're kind of pointing fingers in other directions and saying nobody else is responding very strongly to this. And I'm curious to see what they take responsibility for, what they decide to move forward with, and what this really means. There's been some rumblings from the White House sort of attached to Steve Bannon and other advisors, that there are forces within the intelligence community that are working against them and working against President Trump. This is seen as this sort of core part of a very broad conspiratorial narrative coming from certain actors. And if they use this as a justification to move forward with a purge of the intelligence community, which they have hinted at various points, I think that would be a very negative sign.
You know, today's Thursday. We've almost forgotten that the week began with everybody scratching their heads over that tweet by Donald Trump claiming that Barack Obama tried to bug him at Trump Tower or spy on him there. With all of the claims and innuendos that are going around, just how, at this point in time, what do you surmise as fact and what do you surmise as fiction when it comes to hacking, surveillance, the campaign, and the Russians?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's worth reinforcing that there is very good evidence that WikiLeaks has been a front for Russian intelligence for a long time, and that the information they have chosen to release and push forward through their journalists and other contacts often comes from sources that are unknown, but it does seem to be connected with the broader Russian intelligence objectives. And I think that when we talk about our own election and what happened in November and before, there's still this focus on hacking and leaks and fake news, and really this sort of avoids the entire truth of what was happening, which was for a long time, at least for a year leading up to the election, there was a broad Russian campaign targeted against American society to influence how we think and how we see the truth and how we can evaluate fact and fiction. And this information architecture that they constructed using tools like WikiLeaks and others to influence information being put into it is still there, is still being used against us, and did influence how we voted and what we think about our country and our society. This is very dangerous, and we need to confront it.
WikiLeaks says that in this particular case, it was somebody from inside the CIA who passed it on to somebody else in the private sector. What do you think of that?
I think it's certainly a claim that merits attention, only because there is sort of broad understanding that contractors are the weak links in a number of government agencies. Their vetting procedures tend to be lower, particularly when there's foreign-based contractors, Brits and others involved in large U.S. government contracts as subcontractors to American contractors. It is a vetting process that needs to be shored up for sure, but I think that this is more them saying where it comes from. It's hard to know where it came from, where they got it from, but it's certainly a convenient story for them to tell.
One final question for you, Molly. Right now, is there a smoking gun? We talked about smoking guns. Is there proof that today the Trump administration has ties with Moscow?
It is undeniable that members of the Trump family, the Trump business, and the Trump team have long-term relationships with Moscow, with Russian businesses, and with Russian officials. The question is not about the relationships, but whether or not those relationships were being used to push forward specific policy objectives during the election and now, and whether or not there was collaboration between the Trump team and foreign intelligence or other services to target the American people and to influence our elections in a negative way. And I think that there's a lot of relationships and information that needs to be evaluated and considered, and some of that is happening, but some of it is not. But there's a lot of information there that warrants closer attention.
Molly McKew, many thanks for joining us from Washington.